You meet someone new, and it feels electric. But soon, you're living a script you swore you'd never read again. The reason isn't bad luck. It's a powerful, unconscious force called the repetition compulsion. There is a peculiar kind of exhaustion that comes from the same broken record playing in a different room. You meet someone new. They are charming, intense, perhaps a little wounded. You feel an immediate, almost magnetic pull. But as the weeks pass, a familiar fog descends. The criticism starts. The withdrawal. The walking on eggshells. You find yourself repeating a script you swore you would never read again. If you have ever asked yourself, why do I keep attracting the same kind of toxic person? You are not alone, and you are not simply unlucky. The answer, buried deep in the architecture of the human psyche, is one of the most unsettling yet liberating concepts in modern psychology: the repetition compulsion. This is the unconscious drive to recreate the emotional conditions of our earliest, most painful relationships, not because we want to suffer, but because the familiar feels like safety, and our mind is desperately trying to solve an unsolvable riddle from the past. The concept of the repetition compulsion was first introduced by Sigmund Freud in his 1920 work, Beyond the Pleasure Principle. Freud was perplexed by a clinical observation that defied his earlier theories. Why would a patient, who had experienced a traumatic event, repeatedly dream about that trauma, or worse, actively place themselves in situations that mirrored the original wound? This seemed to contradict the pleasure principle, the idea that humans are fundamentally driven to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Freud proposed a radical, darker hypothesis, that there exists a force more primitive than the pursuit of pleasure, a drive to master and control an overwhelming experience by reenacting it. He called it the demonic element in human nature. The compulsion was not a desire for pain, but a desperate, unconscious attempt to achieve a different outcome. Modern attachment theory reframes this. The repetition compulsion is not about a death drive, but about the brain's relentless pursuit of predictability. A child who grows up in a chaotic, critical, or emotionally neglectful household develops a neural map that says love is unpredictable, love requires sacrifice of self, or love is painful. As adults, the brain actively seeks out relationships that validate this map, because a familiar hell is neurologically safer than an unfamiliar heaven. This is why choosing a stable, kind partner can feel wrong or boring. The brain's limbic system, especially the amygdala, scans for cues that match early experiences. When it finds them, it releases stress hormones and bonding chemicals, creating an addictive loop that keeps us trapped in the pattern. Why can't we just choose better? The answer lies in the limbic system, particularly the amygdala and the anterior cingulate cortex. When we encounter a person who reminds us, even subtly, of a primary caregiver, our implicit memory system activates. We don't think, this person is like my father. We feel a sense of tension, arousal, and an inexplicable sense of rightness. The brain releases a cocktail of stress hormones like cortisol and bonding chemicals like oxytocin, creating a powerful, addictive loop. As Dr. Judith Herman writes in Trauma and Recovery, the repetition compulsion is the psyche's attempt to master an overwhelming experience by turning passive suffering into active participation. The problem is, the script never changes. This neurological wiring is why breaking free requires more than just willpower. The repetition compulsion is not just a psychoanalytic curiosity. It has been empirically validated. A landmark study by Kestenberg on children of Holocaust survivors found that many unconsciously reenacted aspects of their parents' trauma, developing phobias and relational patterns that mirrored the horrors endured. Research by Anderson and P.R. Zybelinski demonstrated the transference effect. Participants with a history of rejection were more likely to perceive a neutral person as rejecting, and they behaved in ways that actually elicited rejection. In a longitudinal study of over 500 couples, Ehrensaft and colleagues found that exposure to violence between parents in childhood was the single strongest predictor of being in a violent relationship as an adult. These studies confirm that the pattern is not about weakness, it's about a learned relational script. The repetition compulsion operates in 3 distinct phases, often without conscious awareness. Phase 1 is unconscious selection. You don't attract toxic people in a mystical sense, you select them. Your brain scans for cues that match your internal working model of relationships. A person who is slightly dismissive, unpredictable, or demanding triggers a signal. This is familiar. This is how love works. A healthy, stable, boringly kind person may actually feel wrong or too good to be true because their behavior does not match your neural map. Phase 2 is the reenactment, where you unconsciously provoke the very behavior you fear. Phase 3 is the confirmation, where the cycle repeats, reinforcing the belief that love is painful. Understanding these phases is the first step to breaking the loop. Breaking the repetition compulsion is not about blaming yourself, it's about reclaiming your agency. The first step is awareness. By recognizing the pattern, you can begin to notice when you feel that magnetic pull toward someone who seems familiar in an unsettling way. The second step is to pause and question, is this person truly healthy for me, or do they just feel familiar? The third step is to slowly expand your tolerance for healthy, stable love, even if it feels boring at first. Therapy, especially attachment-based or trauma-informed work, can help rewire those neural maps. It takes time, but each time you choose a different path, you weaken the old loop and strengthen a new one. You are not doomed to repeat the past, you can write a new script. If you found this exploration of the repetition compulsion valuable, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Understanding the pattern is the first step toward breaking it.